prioritizing profits,
dangerous drug and product cases.
Top 10 podcast highlights, Season 1, 2023. Number 10, 3M Bear Hugger Case from Season 1, Episode 11.
This company, 3M, actually another big 3M case, has this product called the Bear Hugger, and it's a warming device. And basically, it's this blanket that has little holes in it, and it's attached to a machine that sits on the floor. And there's a tube that shoots hot air up into the blanket, and then through the little holes, this hot air goes onto the person's body. The problem with that is that the hot air then is going onto the body and overflowing down over the sides of the table, hitting the floor. Now hot air rises, so it's picking up the bacteria, the debris that's on the floor, and that can then rise back up with the hot air rising, and then it's into that surgical area. So what's happening is that when you use this, the rates of infections, surgical infections, have just skyrocketed. I mean, you can look at the studies of when they started using this, and about 90% of hospitals now use it. I mean, they have great marketing. So, and a surgical infection can be relatively minor and can be treated with antibiotics. However, certain types of surgeries like joint replacements.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you're putting a metal joint into the body, if that gets infected, it's really horrendous.
Yeah, I bet. And it's just so insane how that happens too. Is that the warm air goes into the blanket, and since hot air falls, right, it goes down to the ground, gets all of that bacteria that's on the ground, and then slowly rises back up and just gets in there. It gets into And I mean, so what it does is it disrupts that cold air that's trying to keep everything down. When it's the hot air, it's bringing it back up. And so the problem then is that, people are getting these really bad infections, and it's so hard to get rid of an infection when it's settled into an artificial joint. And so a lot of times people will have to have like IV antibiotics. They'll have to have wound vacs. They oftentimes will have to actually take the prosthesis out and leave like a spacer in there for a while, so like they don't have a joint for a while until it clears up, then replace it. People have had amputations, a number of deaths, because again, they get this horrible infection they can't control. They go septic and they die. I didn't even know you could do that, a spacer in the joint, so someone just doesn't even have a joint for a week.
Well, they have to take it out, but they can't put a new one in until the infection's cleared, because you put another one in, well, you're going to have the same situation. Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of clients who have been through this, and just it's it's horrendous. I mean, you're pretty much bedridden.
Number 9, PSA Chemicals Case from Season 1, Episode 10.
What was happening is that a couple of these companies, or 3 of the companies, had gotten together and were getting a settlement together for about $1.2 billion. And then 3M, which is, allegedly the biggest culprit, there was a trial coming up, and they, basically on the eve of trial, called the trial off and are working. They're working on a settlement, purportedly in the range of $10 billion.
Jeez.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about just these chemicals are everywhere. Most everybody has them in their blood, and they're very dangerous. I mean, they're carcinogens. And what's happening are the regulations are changing, and all of these water suppliers are going to have to use these new and very expensive filtration systems to drop the levels of these chemicals.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a huge project. But this is really like seriously breaking news. And so various water districts are getting involved, getting representation so that they can maximize their recovery. Again, if they, they're going to have to make these very expensive changes. Either they're going to pay out of pocket, or they're going to be passing this on to the consumers. And really, that shouldn't happen. They should be able to get compensated by these companies that have just, contaminated the water. I mean, they've caused the problem that now
the companies now the facilities have to clean up, and they shouldn't have to pay for that cleanup when it's multi-millions of dollars. That's a crazy thing.
And it's good that they aren't just throwing it on the consumer. I feel like that does kind of happen a lot with costs, is that you just kind of see your monthly go up, and
Well, and it may. I mean, it may. I mean, again, if the companies don't get involved in the settlement, potentially they may be passing it on.
Yeah.
And some places have higher levels of these chemicals than others, and are going to require a lot more work than others. So it's a very individual situation.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's several water suppliers, but it's a variety of different locations and areas. I'm assuming this is kind of just across the country, right?
Well, it's across the country. I mean, there are different chemicals that are going to be in higher concentrations in different areas. But one of the really fascinating things that I had learned about this is that they can know. I mean, these chemicals have these like DNA kind of prints. They know exactly what company is responsible for what company. If they find it in your blood, they can tell you it was 3M,
Wow.
it was DuPont. They know.
Yeah.
I mean, these are very specific and patented and very individual chemicals.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I mean, who did it, and there may be in certain situations there may be multiple chemicals that are in a water supply in a particular area, but then which two defendants are responsible and should be on the hook for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not only is it cool, it's kind of terrifying at the same time.
It is.
If they can look at, a blood sample of yours and see specific chemicals in there and know, wow, this only exists from this water plant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of shocking.
Or this company's chemicals, that then is coming through a particular water plant. But I mean, it's not just. I mean, it's in the water, but then it gets into the soil. So then the animals, livestock, and then it's in the meat that you're eating. It's in the milk that you're drinking. I mean, these things are just everywhere. I mean, it's really kind of terrifying.
It snowballs.
Yes. And so finally, it's coming to the point where the government is saying, whoa, not cool. These are chemicals that are killing people, and we need to stop it. And how do we stop it? Well, we have to stop, the water suppliers. First of all, you guys have to clean it up. But now, for them, they need to go step back and say, all right, who caused the problem that we're cleaning up, and hopefully collect from them. And that's one of the things that we're getting involved in, helping get those situations set up and make sure that any of the companies that are interested can maximize their recovery in the settlement.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a massive case, billions of dollars, 10 billion. I mean, that's just an unimaginable amount of money.
Yeah, probably total at least 12 between the couple of settlements.
And for these filtration systems, I'm assuming they're going to be expensive to make for them to create.
Multi-millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a whole new system. It's not the systems that have been used for other chemicals in the past aren't working for these.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that's kind of why they waited so long, and they kind of need the slap on the wrist now to get moving on it. But at the same time, I think they would probably prefer to pay a few million to recreate it than 12 billion.
Yeah. So a lot of the cases are with the various water districts, but individuals also can bring claims against these companies. And there are some very specific injuries that there's probably a lot of things that are being caused by this, but the science has caught up to a few of them and can really link it up. And the conditions right now that we're accepting personal injury specific individual cases on involve testicular cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, prostate cancer, and ulcerative colitis. And on these, if you have this condition, again, you can have a blood test that can determine if these chemicals are in your system and could have contributed to this condition. Obviously, people can get these cancers and these conditions that aren't related to these chemicals, but you can find out if it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it involves a blood test, but this may have caused or contributed. And if that's the case, if you're interested in getting more information, certainly reach out to us, and we'd be glad to help you out with that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a terrifying list of conditions that it can result in.
Number 8, Tesla employees accessing customer cameras from season 1, episode 9.
Tesla's like big in the news lately, big in the news. So we've heard for a while now about the problems with the self-driving features where there's accidents, and then they actually recalled them back in February of this year, changed out some of the software. People got all upset because they bought this vehicle. They wanted that, they wanted that service, the self-driving, and then they had to disable it, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of issues on that. Another Tesla issue, and this one, it's a little bit amusing, but not really, I guess. Some privacy issues. I guess that there are cameras where they can record in the vehicle.
Really?
Yeah. And I guess what was happening was that employees were accessing these videos, and if they were funny or entertaining or interesting, circulating them among themselves.
That's actually hilarious. Well, why is there even cameras in the vehicle in the first place? Is there some type of product use for it?
Well, I don't know. Why is there like karaoke in the vehicle? I mean, they have literally have a speaker on the outside of the car so that you could do karaoke. I don't know why any of these things are in there.
I think if you want to have a good time and do karaoke with the boys and you don't want to go to the bar, maybe there's no karaoke bars around. So you just pull up in the Tesla. Hey, everyone come by.
Well, and you can just drive by and everybody can hear you. I mean, then there's it's like a speaker on the outside of the vehicles. I've heard about that. I had a friend who was telling me how when she wanted to like embarrass her daughter picking her up at school, she'd just pull up and,
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that. That's pretty insane, though, that the employees were accessing and sending around. I mean, it kind of sounds like almost like America's funniest videos.
Well, there probably is some really funny, crazy shit that people do in their cars.
Number 7, don't stick your you-know-what in a vacuum cleaner from season 1, episode 8.
So vacuum cleaners, within the hose part, they used to have like a little fan, and that would help kind of suck up the dust and debris or whatever, since it was closer to the end. Well, unfortunately, a number of men decided.
I knew this is where it was going.
This is where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's not urban legend because that would have been disappointing. This sounds very realistic.
No, it's really real. I mean, actually, I didn't even know how real it was. But so the problem with having that little fan there, and then men put their penises in there, and so then there was some havoc.
Havoc's a nice way to say it,
Yeah. So anyway, so a lot of them don't have the fan there, but still, I thought, well, again, I researched this, and it was crazy because PubMed, I mean, this is like, this is the resource that doctors go to for studies and all. And in fact, the first article that popped up was vacuum cleaner injury to penis, a common neurologic problem. I mean, it's like it happens enough that there were a number of articles that people, had wrote about this.
Yeah.
And so I guess that then goes to maybe this is foreseeable.
Yeah.
Again, I initially thought, well, this is the perfect example. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
But no, if it happens enough, then it is reasonably foreseeable. And so I don't know. Actually, I should go check my vacuum cleaner and see if it specifically says do not insert penis.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably not say penis. I feel like it would say like don't insert bodily.
Maybe you shouldn't be so specific because really you shouldn't insert your finger either.
Yeah, exactly. But that is kind of interesting where, if it happens enough, even though it sounds so ridiculous, if it happens enough, then it almost, is reasonable for someone to do it, I guess.
Well, it's a sign that there's either there's a whole lot of unreasonable people, and then maybe that crosses over into the line where it's reasonable. But, a man putting, something that sucks, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's...
I don't know. No comment.
Well, so, and I just have to say that when I was talking to Peter about this, I was like, the thing that always amazed me was that you would see in these medical records, like the stories that people would come up with to explain how it happened. And just in this one study, they were talking about, this guy saying that, he was vacuuming naked.
Tripped and fell and all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, it was stuff like that. And then the one was, let's see, vacuuming nude while his wife was out shopping. I mean, why would he even mention that his wife wasn't there?
Guys, my wife wasn't there. I know what you're probably thinking.
It turned itself on and caught his penis. I mean, it's like, so there's some real issues here because this
He's
thing
taking a nap, butt naked. He wakes up, cold sweats. All of a sudden, it's right there next to him, attacks him. It turns on by itself.
Oh, gosh. Well, another one, a guy who was a railway signalman, it was in his signal box when he bent down to pick up his tools and caught his penis in a Hoover dustette, which happened to be switched on.
Just so happened, coincidentally.
Yeah, and another guy vacuuming his friend's staircase in a loose-fitting dressing gown. When intending to switch the machine off, he leaned across to reach the plug. At that moment, his dressing gown became undone. And
It came on. The button flew off at the exact moment.
and his penis was sucked into the vacuum cleaner.
Jeez, that's terrifying. I mean,
It's really dangerous.
yeah.
Anyway, but the funny thing that I was saying to Peter is like, when you have these patients, I mean, does it even matter like how it happened? I mean, the fact of the matter is this, you're injured, just treat the injury,
Number 6, deadly eye drops from season 1, episode 7.
Do you remember we talked about the contaminated eye drops and the superbug and all
yeah.
of that?
Yeah,
Crazy,
terrifying.
huh? Yeah, well, so, and they've already been recalled, but again, they're still out there, people probably still have them. There's been another death reported. So the update as of May 15th, up to now 4 people have died and 14 with vision loss, but actually
terrible.
81 injuries, but so the 4th death, and this is just really scary stuff. I mean, again, it's like an eye drop,
Yeah.
not something that people are going to think is going to kill you, but it's been contaminated with this superbug that's antibiotic resistant.
That's what I was thinking. That's what the one that it was that we discussed, where
Yeah.
you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Antibiotics have no effect.
Yeah. And so now it's like 81 people in 18 states. So since the last time we had talked about it, another 13 patients, and out of that, like another death. But yeah, I mean, if you use eye drops, check them out, take a look at them. I mean, I was digging around under my sink for the pods, but these are EzraCare artificial tears or Delsum Pharma's artificial tears. So, make sure that you don't have these things still. If you do, get rid of them immediately. Some of the symptoms that they are saying to keep an eye out for, yellow, green, or clear discharge from the eye pain or discomfort, redness, feeling like you have a foreign body in your eye, blurry vision. But I mean, realistically, if you've used these things and you have anything, I mean,
Yeah.
if I used these things and I had the slightest itch, I'd be in the
I
ER.
I wouldn't even wait until I got like a symptom. If I knew that I was using these, I would just immediately go to the doctor, because it sounds like once it starts getting bad, it can spiral pretty fast.
Yeah. No, definitely I would get it checked out. And definitely get rid of the things if you have them. So,
And this superbug, are you able to give it to other people as well?
yeah, this was one where and it was in like healthcare settings and people were not washing their hands and maybe touching other people. And so the person who actually used the eye drops might not necessarily be the person who ultimately got infected or the other person, but they both could get infected or they could just pass it on to the other person. So I think there were like some adult care homes and places like that where, a number of people got it.
And does the superbug attack the vision, or are people losing vision because it's starting from the eye drops?
Well, so they're getting the infection, and then the infection goes rampant, and of course it's starting in your eye, but then ultimately it can go systemic, and then you can actually die. So, I mean, there have been people who have actually had their eyeballs removed, people who've just lost vision in their eye. Some people, most of the people obviously didn't. There were 81 people, and now they're saying 14 with vision loss and 4 deaths. So the rest of them had some infection. Ultimately, at least so far, haven't lost their vision or died.
Yeah.
Number 5, Phillips CPAP machines linked to cancer from season 1, episode 7.
On the cases that we're handling, one of them that's very active right now are the CPAP cases. And so that's the machine that's used for people who have sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And if you've seen those, and it kind of looks like almost scuba equipment sometimes. And I actually I was like, CPAP, I use that term all the time. And I was like, but what does it actually mean? It's continuous positive airway pressure, which actually makes sense. But I had just never thought about it, and I've talked about CPAPs for years. So anyway, these things and this has been going on for a while because they've actually been recalled since June of 2021, so almost 2 years. And Phillips, the company that manufactures them, actually did issue a recall. And so a lot of people who have them probably know about this.
already, and they're probably also, unfortunately, still stuck potentially using them because some people literally cannot sleep, cannot breathe without them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so sleep apnea, that's when while you're sleeping, you stop breathing.
Yeah. Sometimes you can stop for short periods of time.
Yeah.
And so basically this continuous airway, it basically forces your body to keep breathing so that you can't stop sleeping because sleep apnea can be super dangerous. I mean, it can cause all sorts of other problems. I mean, it's really hard on your cardiovascular system. So it is important to treat. I mean, it causes brain injury. It causes so many problems. And it's a huge problem for people. There's a lot of people who suffer from this. So one of the reasons that there's a lawsuit over this is that Phillips actually knew about the problems with these machines back as early as 2015 and did not recall them. And so people were continuing to use them for like another 6 years.
And what were the problems again?
So the problem is that there is a sound, a part of it is a sound abatement foam, and it's this black foam to make it a little less noisy, a little quieter, especially for like whoever your bed partner is. And so that foam degrades, and people basically inhale little pieces of this foam. Goes into their airway, and it's cancer causing. So they're inhaling the gas from this foam breaking down, and actually little pieces of the foam. They find like this black debris in people's lungs.
Are they like coughing it up? And
well, sometimes, I mean, there's all kinds of conditions that are resulting from it. I mean, it's super dangerous. Some of the diseases that we're seeing are sinus cancer, liver disease, liver cancer, multiple myeloma, acute kidney injury, acute liver failure. I mean, all kinds of cancers, prostate, breast, chronic asthma, chronic bronchitis. I mean, all the things that you would think of because it's going into your lungs, leukemia, nasal cancer, throat cancer.
I'm kind of confused with the kidney and liver, you said?
Yeah, well, there's also like these gases that are getting absorbed, which is affecting, and your body's trying to cycle these toxins out. So that's affecting the liver, the kidneys, all of those organs.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones that are like the most obvious, obviously, are like the throat and the nose and the lungs because you're inhaling those pieces. But, your body's also trying to kick this out. So, I mean, we're seeing pulmonary fibrosis, people who are having pneumonia multiple times. So, I mean, really serious, horrible conditions. And because there are millions of these machines out there. And so in the last couple of years, they've been trying to replace them, but they just have this huge backlog. And so people are having to decide, do I continue to use this thing that might be giving me cancer, or do I not use it? And if you don't, if you could live without it, if you can sleep without it, there are certain things that you can do. Other types of therapy, losing weight sometimes.
Well, isn't there other CPAP or other machines for this?
No.
This is the only machine on the market.
I mean, they have most of the market share. There may be some teeny tiny ones, but yeah, this is it.
Oh
I mean, millions and millions of them. And so they cannot replace them fast enough. And even what they're trying to do is just replace that foam.
Yeah.
But they simply can't. And
And they're still selling them right now.
Yeah.
And do they have the foam, these new ones?
Presumably not. I mean, I don't know the details on that. But I mean, they're making them as fast as they can. But again, that's not a big moneymaker because you're giving them to them for free to replace them, right? So it's a really scary one. I mean, just how widespread it is. I mean, so many millions of people have this condition and they're just stuck.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, the condition is scary enough already, but then there's a machine that helps, and it's causing these insane, serious problems, like across the entire body.
I mean, you're getting a good night's sleep, but a few years later, you got cancer and you're dying.
Yeah, it's a tough trade-off there because then you can't even switch to another machine or anything, which is crazy to imagine. So anyone that is using a machine, it's probably pretty safe to assume that they're falling into this category.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the phone that they used. So they need to get it replaced. And you can register with Phillips. You need to register your machine with Phillips so that you'll get on the list to get the replacement. But in the interim, I mean, and doctors are saying, do what you can. There are some surgical procedures people can have that will help with the sleep apnea or cure it. Avoiding alcohol, not smoking, losing weight, a lot of those things that,
Tough ones.
that a lot of the things that aren't fun, a lot of the things that they say that you should do for all kinds of reasons, but they're not fun to do. And, unfortunately, these things, you could be, you are inhaling carcinogens.
And you said it's from the foam deteriorating. So my first thought would be maybe to just switch it out every 6 months, every year to avoid long use of the same machine. And that might help.
I don't know. You should call Phillips. I don't know.
Yeah.
You could have fixed this. Maybe you just switch it out every few months.
If anything, they would love that. That's even more inventory they're selling off.
Charge a lot for those foam. They'll all of a sudden become super expensive. This is the safe foam.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. And I'm assuming that probably it does get worse as it breaks down. I don't know how quickly it breaks down, but definitely an ongoing problem. And these are cases that this litigation has been going on since 2021 when the recall happened.
Wow.
But in fact, it's kind of crazy, just the numbers. And this is, again, one of those things where people didn't, they hear about it and they have these diseases, but they had no clue that it had anything to do with that. They've been diagnosed with liver cancer, lung cancer, all of these things, and they didn't have any idea that it could have possibly been related to this machine that's basically getting them sleep and keeping them alive.
At times,
And so there weren't a ton of complaints to the company because, again, people didn't have any idea that the problems that they were having were related. But now they're saying that since April of 2021, the FDA's received about 100,000 medical device reports.
Oh my!
And this includes several hundred deaths. So, and so between 2011 and 2021, there were only 30 medical device reports.
Wow.
Yeah, and none that talked about injury or death. But now, of course, they're going crazy, and I think there are a lot of people out there who may not know that some of the problems that they've had, some of these medical conditions that they could have had for years, are related to this.
Yeah, and that was kind of my thought, was if this recall was in 2021, and it seems like this is obviously becoming a massive problem more recently. How did it take so long? The recall was so long ago, but it sounds like even though they knew, the consumers had no idea, and that they were having these issues, and obviously not correlating it with a machine that is helping them sleep or even keeping them alive at night.
Yeah. Well, they didn't know, but apparently Phillips, and again, I don't know the specifics on the documents, but apparently there's some evidence that they knew as early as 2015 that these things were breaking down and that people were inhaling them. And of course, they had to have known what what the materials are and that they are potentially carcinogenic. Yeah. So that's all coming out. Actually, the place that we're at with the litigation right now is what's called discovery, where they're having to turn over internal documents, and of course the plaintiffs are having to provide their medical records and things like that. Depositions are happening. So a lot of that information is just coming to light now, but clearly they knew there was a problem with these things, and they sat on it for a really long time. And so, had they recalled this back in 2015, how many people would not have gotten cancer? How many people in the last 6 years of exposure every single night inhaling this shit? How many people, are they going to kill from this delay? So, nasty, nasty stuff.
Number 4, what do you do if a dog bites you? From season 1, episode 6.
But when there is a dog bite, is this a case that you primarily just take to the insurance, or is this something that is worthwhile consulting an attorney?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's generally, I always say consult with an attorney because, you know what, if you consult with an attorney, you can always decide not to hire them and to handle it on your own. But getting more information, and again, the laws in different states are different. And we were talking about, like, Arizona has a strict liability, but some states don't. Some states, it's more of a negligence standard. And so then it's, did you know or should you have known that your dog was vicious, was a vicious animal. And so, that, it's kind of interesting because, we call that the one free bite rule.
Yeah.
And so that means that, until the dog bites the first time, you don't know your dog's a biter and you don't know your dog's dangerous.
Interesting.
So in some states, dogs get that one free bite. Yeah. And then,
They get and the worst part is they get the taste for blood at that point. So then they're just absolutely loose, wild.
Well, all right, let's not get crazy. Maybe not.
No.
But,
Well, I think it's really interesting because, I used to take Bruno to the dog park a lot, and I used to think it was such a great opportunity to socialize him with other dogs. But I quickly realized after, a few times there that not everyone's dogs is as well behaved as Bruno.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of dogs that, even if they are well behaved, once they're out there, they're playing, they're going back and forth. I mean, things can kind of get out of hand pretty quickly, and it's hard to predict that.
Right. Well, and sometimes, again, a dog is just playing, and as part of the play, dogs bite each other. I mean, generally not viciously, but they bite each other during play. And if you're playing with the dog may bite you, again, thinking it's play, but, that you could break the skin, it could injure you.
Yeah.
So it could be pretty serious. And one of the things you had asked about whether you should get in touch with an attorney. I think we're thinking of kind of minor injuries, but some of the cases that I've seen have been pretty significant. And again, children tend to be the ones that are bitten most often, and you see a lot of children getting bitten in the face.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're down there, they have their face right up in the dog's face,
Yeah.
and they think that it's all fun and games, and they've seen cartoons of Bluey or whoever, and and they're messing with the dog, and the dog snaps and bites them. And some serious facial injuries requiring cosmetic surgery. There was actually a case recently in the news, and I had forgotten about this when I was thinking about talking about this, but it was actually a model, and I don't remember if it was her boyfriend or her friend's home, but the dog jumped at her and bit her entire top lip off. And of course, they went to the emergency room immediately and took it with them, but they were unable to reattach it. And so she was completely disfigured. And this was a woman who was a model who was making her living, through her appearance. I believe she was also maybe a skateboard star. I'm trying to remember the details on this. I think it was a lot of social media. And actually, if you check, I know it was on TikTok and some of the sites, but she went through this process of showing the photographs as she went along through her recovery. Wow. And of course, she had to heal up, and then she had cosmetic surgery to try to kind of rebuild her face. But so it can be just, horrendous injuries.
And I know that there's such thing as lost wages, but usually, I'm familiar with that in car crashes where, you don't have access to your car and then you have to lose, or you're injured and you lose work time. But for something like that where it's affecting your livelihood, it's not necessarily she has to take a few weeks off. It's, she's probably not going to be a model anymore.
Right. And that's just something, again, all of these cases are very individual, and you look at that specific person's injuries. And so somebody whose appearance really makes a big difference is going to have significantly more injuries in that, in that area. But even aside from the loss of earnings, that situation is, multiple surgery after surgery, and you're going to have downtime and recuperation time, whatever your job is. And then just the emotional distress. Facial injuries are horrible in any type of accident or injury, and then these children. They're young children, and I guess it's difficult everywhere. But you go to school and you have this facial scarring, and even with treatment, we've had cases. They'll have permanent scarring even if they don't have total, losing a lip or something along those lines. But yeah, so different states have different rules, and again, oftentimes you wouldn't know if somebody has insurance coverage or not. And there's always weird issues too, like a dog is at somebody else's house.
Yeah.
And so generally it's going to be, at least in Arizona, it's going to go back to that dog owner. But then, I've had cases where we've tried to figure out, okay, well, was there negligence on the person who, maybe it was dog sitting or the dog was visiting there, and was it somehow, did they contribute to the situation that caused the injury? So those kinds of situations, it's always best to talk to somebody.
Number 3, CoolSculpting weight loss gone wrong, from season 1, episode 6.
A big story came out in the New York Times, and it involves the CoolSculpting procedure. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's how have you missed this? But
CoolSculpting? Well, I'm not really in the industry of.
Well, so the thing is, there's billboards everywhere. It's just this huge procedure, and basically what it is it's a device that you put this device on problem areas on your body, and it basically freezes your fat cells. Yeah. And so you see, it's sounding familiar now, right?
It is.
Yeah, so the process is and they're in dermatologist offices, med spas, as well as plastic surgery offices, but it's not surgery. And so it's super appealing because it's, basically they say no downtime, and you can, melt away, freeze and then melt away your fat. So what supposedly happens is this device is applied, and it freezes the fat. And then over the course of the next few weeks, the fat cells break down, die, get absorbed into your body, and you're supposed to be able to spot reduce. And so huge popular product. But guess what? There's problems, or we wouldn't be talking about it, right?
Sounds a little too good to be true.
It sounds too good to be true. And, the problem, again, is that the companies promote it as, low risk or no risk. Well, it's not terribly inexpensive. I think it averages about $3,200. Yeah, it's about $3,200 for the procedure, which it's less than surgeries. But basically, it's you come in, spend your. Okay, I actually think they promoted it as doing it at fat loss on your lunch hour.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah, just have like a Big Mac and freeze off the calories.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
So, it just got crazy. And people, are like buying these machines. I think it made, was it like over $2 billion so far?
Insane.
Yeah. Big deal. Obviously something that a lot of people, it's going to appeal to a lot of people. The problem is that, yes, there's a risk, and it was really downplayed at the beginning. But what the risk is, and it's a big nasty thing, it's called PAH, or paradoxical adipose hyperplasia.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's nasty. Basically what it is that for some people in the area that's treated, the fat grows and hardens and lodges in your body. And so some people, instead of having less fat, they now had more fat, and it was like hard as a rock. And there were some where it was like big masses in their abdomen that had to actually, then you have to go in and you have to have surgery to remove it. And it's basically a deformity. It's very traumatic. And here are these people going in trying to think they're going to look better, and they come out looking significantly worse.
Yeah, and especially in kind of the beauty field product area, this entire area, right? You're kind of preying on people's insecurities. People are coming to these places already, maybe not feeling great about themselves, about their body, whatever it may be, and looking for, a remedy. And when you offer a quick fix like this, that seems like it has no downside. Doing it in a lunch break, right, where you can just kind of go and get it done and go straight back to work, that sounds incredibly appealing to a ton of people.
Yeah, and that's why they've made so much money. Problem is, again, when they first came out, they were saying that the risk, they were aware of this potential problem. Mm-hmm. They were initially saying the risk was about 1 in 20,000. As time went on, there were some problems actually with people realizing that this was related, because again, you have the procedure and then you're not even expected to see good results for several weeks. And so then these bad results would come up weeks or months later, and people wouldn't know that it was related. They thought, well, maybe I've gained back weight. Sometimes it was obvious if it was like a big rock-like substance, that sort of thing. But so there were not a lot of reports. People didn't understand that the issues that they were having were necessarily related. I think the reason for the big story and what really brought this to light was Linda Evangelista, who was a big supermodel in the 80s and 90s. She had this procedure done. And I think it was in 2021. At least she came out and talked about it and filed a lawsuit in 2021. And she had the procedure done on various parts of her body, and she had this horrible reaction. And literally, she said that she became a recluse. She would not leave her home.
Wow.
Here's this woman who, was absolutely, one of the top beauties in the country, in the world, probably. And now, not only has she not improved these little areas where she wanted to lose some fat, but there actually was a whole story in People a few months back, and she showed some pictures with her clothes on. But it was crazy. And this was after multiple surgeries, and she could afford to have all these surgeries to try to improve it. So when she came out, all of a sudden the complaints started flooding in because people were like, oh my God, that's what happened to me too. That's a result of that. And so the complaints, I think they went from right following Linda Evangelista coming out about this whole situation. That year there were 1,100 adverse event reports, more than they'd had in the entire 10 years before.
Wow.
And then Last year, there was more than 1,900. So people are figuring this out. And the doctors, the doctors who are performing the procedure, of course, they know also that there might be this small risk. But they started coming forward and saying, wait a minute, I'm in this relatively small practice, and I'm having multiple patients that have this PAH. It's not 1 in 20,000. And in fact, in 2017, a group of doctors came out and said that they believed it was 1 in 100.
Oh my God. And that was in 2017. And you mentioned that she filed the lawsuit in 2021.
Right.
So this has been out for a little bit. And unfortunately, this is kind of what happens is that once one person, especially, whether it's an individual or a law firm comes out and says like, oh, this is an issue, then all of a sudden there's a flood of people that also had this issue, but just didn't make that connection.
Right. And it's a little bit different too, because, people have some kind of a little bit of an issue about it. They're like, oh, I went in. First of all, when people have plastic surgery, how many times do they not tell anybody? They want it to be a big secret, right?
Yeah.
And so this is, again, one of those things where it's even easier to keep it as a secret because you can do it on your lunch hour. It's not like you're going to miss work for a week or 2 weeks or something to recuperate. So I think that there's a little bit of shame involved in it also. And then feeling like, oh, was I being too vain? Did I somehow deserve this? And, kind of hesitancy. Another reason that there were not a lot of complaints is that when people did have problems and they would contact the company, and the company that owns it now is Allergan Aesthetics, which is part of AbbVie. When they would contact the company would oftentimes say, well, we're really sorry this happened. And yes, it is a rare occurrence, and we're willing to pay for your surgeries to have to have these corrective surgeries. However, you got to sign a confidentiality agreement. You can't tell anybody.
Wow.
Right. And so people can't afford to do the surgeries unless they have the company pay for it. And now they have to keep their mouths shut.
And then, and how does that play out when, a case comes out and it says like, you can't actually pursue money? If they sign that document, does that mean they can't pursue it down the line?
Yeah. If they've signed a settlement agreement, and so basically they presumably settled for whatever the amount was. Yeah, that's it. They're done. They're through. But they also are not reporting that they've had these problems. And so these numbers are staying super low that anybody knows about, when really they're significantly higher.
And what makes it even worse too is the model that you mentioned. She had the money for the surgery and she was getting these surgeries, but it wasn't completely fixing the issue. So even these individuals that can't afford it and they have to reach out to the company itself and have them pay for the surgeries, thinking, this is going to fix my problems. Okay, I can't talk about it, but it will fix my problems. They go and get the surgeries and it still doesn't?
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't. And even if there's an improvement, they can remove this, these fat clumps at this point in masses. First of all, now you've had an invasive surgery, which you were trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah.
You've got scarring, and then you have whatever the risks are to undergo that corrective surgery. So, you go, this started as being a quick thing, low risk, lunch hour, I'm going to look better. And all of a sudden, years later, you're tens of thousands of dollars in. You've had surgeries, you're permanently scarred. Again, even if the masses are removed, you've got scarring from the surgery to get in there and remove them. So, it's really been a nightmare for a lot of people. And I think it'll be really interesting also, now that this New York Times story came out and then the People story, how many more people are going to come forward. And hopefully people will be more cognizant of the actual risks if they're going to go in and consider this procedure. It's great to lose a little bit of fat, but this wasn't for huge. This wasn't like this was like spot reduction, and it was a quick fix. But it's in my opinion, not worth it.
Number 2, Tylenol, acetaminophen linked to autism, from season 1, episode 4.
Just recently, some new stats came out, and when we talked, I think I had told you guys that the rate of autism was 1 in 44. They have new statistics that literally just came out last week, and it's actually now 1 in 36, which is a 22% increase from 2018. So this is not getting better.
Yeah.
It's getting worse.
That's insane.
So, 1 in 36, that's, every classroom, right?
Yeah.
It's...
Who's publishing this? Is this a governmental study or is this...
This was the CDC. So,
CDC.
the Center for Disease Control.
Yeah, and we'll probably put a link up somewhere. And a quick shout out, I was talking about this case with some of my friends the other day, And, I'm get very emphatic. I get very kind of excited about it.
You do?
It's so interesting to me. And I think it's so crazy how few people know about it. And when I start talking about these insane statistics that are coming out, people are in absolute disbelief. And so, I think one thing that I definitely want to make sure that we continue to do is just make sure that everything that we're saying on this podcast, we're going to be providing sources, definitely in the description, probably add some pop-ups as well. And hopefully in the future, I think we're probably going to do a sit down, probably like a nice little video conversation, just going through all of these dense studies, because I think this type of information is so interesting, but almost unbelievable that it's going on.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because I was on the other end of your texts on Saturday night when apparently you were hanging out with a bunch of nursing students.
Yes.
That you wanted to
might have had a few drinks as well. So.
Yeah, exactly, and gotten impassioned about the topic. And I was of course texting back and explaining, yes, we have the studies, and we're going to provide the studies and the statistics and all of that. But it really kind of took me back to realizing, that I am so used to this but when I first got involved in this area, I was completely shocked. I didn't believe it either. I was like, that's just impossible. How could they get away with it? And when people first start hearing these things, they do feel that way. So I get that. And we do want to be transparent. We want to provide all of the information we have. I actually sat down and pulled out links to, there's probably like 15 or 20 studies on the autism and Tylenol. And I know that those have gone up on our website. There will be a link to that. So for people who want to do a deep dive into these studies and really get the details, absolutely, we want to be able to provide that because it is hard to believe. And, people are crazy lawyers and all that. But to that end, I do just want to say also that a lot of lawyers might be crazy. I might be one of them. But we're not stupid. And, when we pursue these cases, it is our time and our money.
Yeah.
And we invest a lot. And if the case is unsuccessful, we lose all of that. Mm-hmm. So I say, as all attorneys who are doing these types of cases, we have no interest in some crazy case that we cannot prove. And it's tough to prove these cases. So they are pretty solid before they get to this point where cases are filed and they're getting consolidated and you've got, some of the real big players involved in these. It's not, we have nothing to gain and everything to lose if it's not a viable case.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people kind of have this almost assumption that lawyers are kind of shooting in the dark, right? Like looking for any type of case that could get them money, but that's not it at all. Like,
well, it might be, but those are the bankrupt lawyers. Those are the ones who don't survive because, you can't lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over and over again.
Yeah. And just, that's just not the case at all. And, something that I kind of realized as well is, when I was talking about it, I was like, this is getting consolidated. This is happening.
Sounds so official.
It does. And people are like, okay, what does that mean? But it does mean something, right? Like if a case is getting consolidated, there is definitely enough kind of groundwork there. There's enough cases around the country. There's enough law firms involved in it that they see the potential, that they see there's wrongdoing, that everyone's kind of coming together and bringing the cases in one place.
Yes, and the thing about consolidation is that the reason a case gets consolidated is because there are too many cases to handle individually.
That's a great explanation right there.
There you go.
There's literally too many. There's
too many. And in fact, the defendant, the manufacturer, usually wants them consolidated too, because, maybe you have, 100 lawyers around the country, each with our own case or 2 or 3 cases, but all of those cases, that same group of lawyers that the manufacturer's hired is dealing with all of those, and they're running from state to state to state. So oftentimes the manufacturers say, yes, we want it consolidated. We recognize there are so many cases. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to make more sense for everybody to do this. So it's maybe a technical term, but it means that this is a really substantial size case. Yeah. And there's enough of them that the judge has agreed, yes, we're going to put these all together and fight them out as a group.
And it's so interesting to see that. I mean, you mentioned that study was released, this week?
Yeah, by the time, actually it was last week, so I'm not sure when this one's going to air. But yeah, that's a brand new study that came out from the CDC on the autism.
And it's just so terrifying that it's, it's not getting better.
Yeah, it's not. And, one of the things, actually, when I was at the Harris Martin conference last week that was in Tucson, I also was listening to some information on some baby food cases, and a lot of the baby food has heavy metals, and heavy metals can also lead to autism.
Christ.
I know, poor babies.
Again, man, shitty under the stick, and heavy metals in baby food.
Yeah.
This is that just seems so insane to just hear straight out.
I know it is. It's really crazy, but there's something going on. I mean, nobody can question that there's something going on, that the rate of autism is going so crazy. I mean, this was not the case when I was in school. This was not the case even a few years ago. I mean, just looking from 2018, we're going from 1 in 44 to 1 in 36. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. Now, what is it? Is it the Tylenol? Is it baby food? Are there? I mean, individual situations may be environmental, where a certain group of kids are exposed to something in a neighborhood, that sort of thing. I mean, it may be a combination of things, but something is happening here, and it's a good thing that we're looking at that we're trying to figure it out, that these studies are being done and finding these, because we may need to change in a variety, more than one thing.
And number 1, racist behavior at Tesla factory in California, from season 1, episode 9.
All right, so that's not all the problems with Tesla.
Okay, let's hear it.
So actually, most recently, they've had a couple of racial discrimination lawsuits.
Really?
Yeah, big time. In fact, there was a $3.2 million verdict.
Wow.
For a black employee, and apparently at the main factory, it's just awful. I mean, they are just treat people horribly. And again, I'm just saying what was alleged in the lawsuit, and that apparently the jury believed, because $3 million of that was punitive damages against Tesla.
Wow.
So, and the issue with that, he was definitely harassed, and he reported the harassment, and nothing was done to correct it. And then after that, there's another case that was actually filed back in 2017, alleging the same issues, and they now want to turn that into a class action.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was one individual who had filed a lawsuit and now is saying this should actually be a class action. And in support of making it a class action, he provided 240 affidavits from other employees who all had experienced, horrible racist behavior. In fact, they say it's a hotbed for racist behavior.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused here. It's in the factory specifically that it seems like it's
on the production floor.
Yeah,
apparently.
especially prevalent there.
Yeah.
And it's just straight up, people being racist.
Well, some of the quotes were that they would use the N-word. They would call him, quote, boy or monkey.
Jesus.
Referred to a woman as having monkey toes, and just horrible things along those lines. And again, you're always going to have some idiot, perhaps, employee doing this kind of stuff, but it's incumbent upon the management, and if this gets reported, you need to stop it. You need to fire the person who's exhibiting this behavior, not the victims, obviously.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.